They had over 1700 years to erase this from history, but now, it's your time to know the truth. What you are about to discover has been kept in the shadows for centuries, protected by walls of silence that very few dare to cross. Have you ever wondered why Mary Magdalene disappeared from official history? Why was a woman so close to Jesus reduced to a mere footnote? The answer lies not in what you were taught, but in what was deliberately hidden from you. There are documents, ancient texts, entire gospels that never reached your hands. And when you discover what they contain, you'll understand why powerful institutions have fought for millennia to keep them secret. This isn't just another story about religion. This is about power, control, and the systematic manipulation of humanity's deepest spiritual truth. It's about an extraordinary woman whose voice was silenced because her message was too revolutionary, too dangerous to the foundations of the establishment. Are you ready to discover why Mary Magdalene was erased from history? Why were her teachings considered so threatening that they needed to be destroyed? What truths do these forbidden manuscripts contain that would forever change your understanding of spirituality? Because what we're about to reveal here isn't just historical information. It's an awakening, an invitation to question everything you thought you knew about faith, about the power of religious institutions, and about your own connection to the divine. For the next few minutes, we're going to walk together along a path that very few have walked. We're going to open doors that have remained closed for centuries, and when this video ends, you won't be able to see the spiritual world the same way again. The truth about Mary Magdalene is not just her truth, it's our truth. A truth that has been waiting for the exact moment to emerge from the shadows and transform the consciousness of those ready to receive it. Do you feel that tingling in your chest? That feeling that something important is about to be revealed? Trust that intuition. Your soul recognizes what is coming. Take a deep breath, open your mind, and prepare to discover the forbidden truth that changed the course of spiritual history forever. It all starts now. To understand why Mary Magdalene was erased from history, we need to travel back to 325 AD. In the city of Nicaea, under the orders of Emperor Constantine, more than 300 bishops gathered to make a decision that would change the spiritual destiny of humanity forever. What was at stake? Nothing less than absolute control over which spiritual truths would reach future generations and which would be buried forever. Imagine the scene. Men of power dressed in ornate robes, fervently debating which sacred texts deserved to be preserved and which should be destroyed. In their hands, they held not only scrolls and manuscripts, but also the power to shape the faith of billions of people yet unborn. This was the Council of Nicaea, and here began one of the most monumental cover-ups in history. Among all those texts that were deliberately excluded from what we know today as the Bible were entire Gospels written by and about Mary Magdalene. But why were these texts so dangerous? What did they contain that so threatened the power structure that was being built? The answer will shock you. These documents not only portrayed Mary Magdalene as a spiritual leader equal to or superior to the male apostles, but also revealed teachings about a direct connection with the divine that made the intermediation of any religious institution unnecessary. Do you realize how revolutionary this was? If people could connect directly with the sacred, why would they need a church hierarchy? If Mary Magdalene had received secret teachings and had her own spiritual authority, how could they justify a system where only men had access to religious power? The answer was simple and devastating. Eliminate all evidence of its importance. Over the following centuries, a systematic campaign of destruction began. Entire libraries were burned. Manuscripts were confiscated and destroyed. Any mention of the forbidden texts was punished with persecution, torture, and death. But here's the fascinating thing. They couldn't destroy everything. Some texts survived, hidden in caves, buried in the desert, guarded by secret communities that understood the value of these revelations. The most famous of these discoveries occurred in 1945 in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. A farmer searching for fertilizer found a clay jar containing 13 codices with Gnostic texts that had remained hidden for more than 1,500 years. Among these texts was the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, fragmented but legible, containing teachings that completely contradict the official narrative we had been taught. If you feel that these kinds of hidden truths should be known to more people, I invite you to join this community. Click subscribe and activate the bell, because here we will reveal what others are afraid to say. Because the truth doesn't belong to institutions, it belongs to those who have the courage to seek it. The question you must ask yourself now is, how many other truths have been deliberately hidden? What else don't we know about our own spiritual heritage? Now that you understand how she was silenced, it's time to discover who Mary Magdalene really was. And I warn you, what you're about to hear will completely shatter the image you've been sold your entire life. Forget everything you thought you knew. Forget the repentant woman, the redeemed sinner, the secondary figure who appears briefly in Jesus' story. That wasn't Mary Magdalene. That was a deliberate invention to hide her true power. Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. This lie was perpetuated for centuries by Pope Gregory the Great in 591, who deliberately confused Mary Magdalene with other Marys mentioned in the Gospels to create a narrative that degraded her and minimized her importance. Why would they do this? Because the real Mary Magdalene was too great a threat to the patriarchal power that was being established. Historical and archaeological evidence reveals a completely different reality. Mary Magdalene came from Magdala, a prosperous fishing town on the Sea of Galilee. Her name, Magdalene, not only indicates her place of origin, but also suggests a leadership position in her community. She was a woman of means, educated, and financially independent. But here comes the most shocking part. According to the Gnostic texts that survived the destruction, Mary Magdalene wasn't just a follower of Jesus. She was his closest disciple, his spiritual confidant, and the recipient of secret teachings that not even the 12 apostles knew. The Gospel of Philip, one of the texts found at Nag Hammadi, states that Jesus loved her more than all the disciples and used to kiss her on the mouth. Do you realize what this means? We're not just talking about romantic love, but a spiritual connection so deep that the other disciples became jealous of her. In the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Peter tells her, "Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than other women. Tell us the words of the Savior that you remember, that you know, and we don't." This is not fiction. These are words preserved in 1500-year-old manuscripts. Mary Magdalene had access to mystical teachings that others did not. She was a visionary, a spiritual leader, who understood aspects of divinity that were beyond the conventional understanding of her time. Her revelations spoke of the inner light, of the Christ who dwells within every human being, of a direct connection with the sacred without the need for intermediaries. And do you know what's most revolutionary of all? Mary Magdalene taught that both men and women had equal access to spiritual enlightenment. In a society where women were considered second-class citizens, she proclaimed absolute spiritual equality. Imagine the impact this had. A woman who was not only spiritually equal to men, but who had been chosen by Jesus himself to receive the deepest teachings. A woman who had the authority to teach, to lead spiritual communities, to interpret the sacred scriptures. The texts show us that after the crucifixion, when the male disciples were terrified and hiding, it was Mary Magdalene who had the clearest vision of the resurrected Christ. It was she who was commissioned to carry the message of the resurrection to the other disciples. It was she who became the apostle of the apostles. But this narrative was too dangerous for a religious structure that was being organized around male power and hierarchical authority. If Mary Magdalene had been the main disciple, if she had received secret teachings, if she had her own spiritual authority, then the entire system being built would lose its legitimacy. The solution was brutal but effective. Transform the spiritual leader into a repentant sinner, turn the teacher into a silent student, change the visionary into a submissive follower. For more than 400 years, this lie remained intact. Entire generations grew up believing that Mary Magdalene was little more than a footnote in Jesus' story. But the truth always finds a way to emerge. And now, with the Nag Hammadi manuscripts and other archaeological discoveries, we are recovering the true picture of one of history's most important spiritual figures. Mary Magdalene wasn't a sinner. She was a teacher. She wasn't a silent follower. She was a visionary leader. She wasn't a supporting character. She was the protagonist of a spiritual revolution that threatened to change the world forever. Now it's time to delve into the documents that were considered so dangerous, they deserved to be erased from the face of the earth. These are not rumors or speculation. They are real texts, ancient manuscripts that you can study today if you have the courage to do so. The discovery of Nag Hammadi in 1945 was no coincidence. It was as if the universe itself had decided it was time for these truths to come to light. 13 leather codices, perfectly preserved in the Egyptian desert for over 1,500 years, awaited the exact moment to reveal their secrets. Among these lost treasures is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, although sadly it is incomplete. The first 6 pages and 4 middle pages were lost forever. Coincidence? Many researchers believe these pages were deliberately destroyed because they contained the most explosive revelations. But what survived is enough to change everything we thought we knew. In this Gospel, Mary Magdalene recounts a mystical vision in which she receives direct teachings about the nature of the soul, the path to enlightenment, and liberation from the material ego. These are not simple parables, but precise instructions on how to transcend the limitations of physical existence. Then we have the Gospel of Philip, which reveals the intimate relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. This text speaks of her as the companion of the Savior and describes how he loved her more than all the disciples. But it goes beyond human love, describing a spiritual union that represents the integration of the divine masculine and feminine principles. The Gospel of Thomas, although not specifically focused on Mary Magdalene, contains teachings that perfectly complement her message. Here we find the words, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," a revelation that makes any external institution unnecessary for connecting with the divine. But perhaps the most controversial of all is the dialogue of the Savior, where Mary Magdalene is shown asking profound questions about the nature of existence, demonstrating a level of spiritual understanding that rivals and even surpasses that of the male disciples. And do you know what's most fascinating? These texts weren't written centuries later as afterthought propaganda. Carbon dating analysis and paleographic studies confirm that many of these manuscripts date back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, some as old as the canonical Gospels that were included in the Bible. This means that during the early centuries of Christianity, there were multiple interpretations of Jesus' teachings. There was no single, official version. There was a rich diversity of texts, perspectives, and spiritual understandings. The Gnostics, as the followers of these alternative teachings were called, believed in gnosis, which means direct knowledge. For them, salvation did not come through blind faith or obedience to religious authorities, but through experiential knowledge of the divine. Mary Magdalene was considered by these groups to be one of the main transmitters of this gnosis. Her teaching spoke of the inner light that dwells within every human being, of the divine potential that exists within all of us, of the possibility of directly experiencing the presence of the sacred. Do you realize why this was so threatening to the emerging institutional church? If every person could directly access the divine, why did they need priests, bishops, or popes? If Mary Magdalene had imparted teachings on personal enlightenment, how could they maintain control over the masses? The response was systematic and ruthless. All these texts were declared heretical. Their followers were persecuted, tortured, and executed. Their libraries were burned. Their communities were dispersed. I want to know what you think. Do you think the church was right to hide these texts? Write in the comments, "I want the whole truth," because I need to know if you're ready for what comes next. Because what we're about to discover about the specific content of these documents will challenge everything you thought you knew about spirituality, power, and the true nature of your connection to the divine. The texts are there. The evidence is undeniable. The only question that remains is, are you ready to face a truth that has been hidden for almost 2,000 years? Prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear will shake the foundations of everything you've been taught about spirituality. These are not modern interpretations or speculations. They are direct translations of 500-year-old manuscripts that reveal teachings that have been forbidden for millennia. In the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, she recounts a vision where the Savior teaches her about the nature of the soul and its journey back to the divine. Listen to these exact words, translated directly from Coptic. "The soul that has overcome the world need not fear the powers that try to stop it, for it has found the peace that surpasses all understanding. Do you realize how revolutionary this is? Mary Magdalene isn't talking about salvation through an external institution. She's describing an internal process of transformation where each individual soul has the power to transcend the limitations of the material world. But this is just the beginning. The text continues with Mary explaining how the mind that is freed from matter is no longer subject to the laws of time and space. She is describing states of expanded consciousness, direct mystical experiences that any human being can achieve. The male disciples, according to the text, did not understand these teachings. Peter even asks, "Is it possible that the Savior spoke like this to a woman about secrets we do not know?" Levi's response is devastating. "Peter, you have always been impulsive. Now I see you fighting this woman as if you were her enemy. If the Savior considered her worthy, who are you to reject her?" In the Gospel of Philip, we find even deeper revelations. Here we are told that those who say they will first die and then be resurrected are mistaken. If they do not first receive the resurrection while they live, they will receive nothing when they die. Do you understand what this means? Resurrection is not a future event that occurs after physical death. It is a transformation of consciousness that can and must occur while we are alive. It is a spiritual awakening, an enlightenment that allows us to experience our divine nature here and now. The text goes on to explain that the kingdom of heaven is within you and also outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. This isn't abstract theology. These are precise instructions for self-knowledge and spiritual fulfillment. Mary Magdalene and the Gnostics were teaching specific techniques for accessing higher states of consciousness. In the dialogue of the Savior, Mary asks a question that reveals the depth of her understanding. How is the work of femininity dissolved? And she receives this extraordinary response. When you no longer do the work of femininity, then the work of masculinity will cease also. She is speaking of the integration of the masculine and feminine aspects of the psyche, a concept that modern psychology is only just beginning to understand. But here comes the most shocking part of all. In several of these texts, Mary Magdalene is described as receiving what is called the kiss of wisdom directly from Jesus. This is not a romantic physical kiss. It is the direct transmission of spiritual knowledge, a mystical initiation where divine wisdom is transferred from master to disciple. The text describes that during this transmission, Mary receives visions of the creation process, understands the illusory nature of the material world, and learns about the different levels of reality that exist beyond ordinary perception. One of the most powerful teachings Mary receives is about what they call the inner Christ. According to these texts, every human being carries within them a divine spark, a Christ-like aspect that can be awakened and developed. You don't need to wait for an external Savior because the Savior already lives within you. Mary Magdalene taught that whoever drinks from my mouth will become like me, and I will become like them, and hidden things will be revealed to them. This is a direct invitation to spiritual transformation, a promise that enlightenment is within reach of anyone willing to undertake the inner journey. The texts also reveal specific practices. They discuss meditation techniques, visualization, and working with breath and vital energy. They describe how to elevate the mind above turbulent emotions and how to find the inner silence where the voice of the divine dwells. Do you realize why these texts were considered so dangerous? Not only did they portray a woman as the supreme spiritual teacher, but they also offered a direct path to enlightenment that made any institutional mediation unnecessary. According to these manuscripts, Mary Magdalene was not only an enlightened disciple, but also a transmitter of spiritual lineage. Her teachings created entire communities of seekers who practiced these techniques of inner transformation. The question that naturally arises is, what would the world have been like if these teachings had been preserved and disseminated instead of being suppressed? What would our spirituality be like today if we had grown up knowing these direct methods of connecting with the divine? Because what these texts reveal are not beliefs we should blindly accept, but techniques we can experience and verify for ourselves. They are precise maps for the journey back to our original divine nature. Now that you know the teachings that were hidden, it's time to understand exactly how and why religious powers decided to manipulate humanity's faith. What you're about to discover isn't a conspiracy theory. It's documented history that will make you question everything you believed about religious institutions. The censorship process was neither accidental nor spontaneous. It was a systematic, calculated, and ruthless campaign that spanned centuries. And it all began when Christianity ceased to be a spiritual revolution and became a tool of political control. The decisive moment came in 313, when Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity in the Roman Empire. But here's what they don't tell you in history classes. Constantine didn't convert to Christianity because of a spiritual revelation. He did so because he fully understood the political potential of this new religion. Early Christianity was diverse, decentralized, and impossible to control. There were multiple interpretations, different leaders and autonomous communities that followed the teachings that resonated with their spiritual experience. It was a beautiful, free-spirited chaos that didn't serve the purposes of imperial power. The solution was brilliant in its malevolence: create an official version of Christianity that served the interests of the state, while systematically eliminating any alternative that promoted individual spiritual autonomy. The Council of Nicaea was just the beginning. It was there that it was decided which texts would be considered canonical and which would be declared apocryphal or heretical. And what was the criterion for this selection? It was not historical authenticity, nor spiritual depth, nor even the antiquity of the texts. The criterion was simple and brutal: any text that promoted centralized religious authority and blind obedience was included. Any text that taught a direct connection to the divine or gave spiritual power to women was eliminated. The teachings of Mary Magdalene were especially dangerous because they offered the exact opposite of what the new imperial Christianity needed. While the institutional church preached the need for sacred intermediaries, Mary taught that every person could directly access the divine. While they established male hierarchies, she demonstrated that women could be supreme spiritual leaders. The ensuing campaign of destruction was merciless. Laws were enacted making possession of Gnostic texts punishable by death. Specialized groups of heretic hunters were created to roam the empire, seeking out and destroying these manuscripts. Rewards were offered for denouncing those who kept copies of the banned Gospels, but the manipulation was even more subtle and perverse. Not only did they destroy the original texts, but they also created distorted versions of the figures that they couldn't completely eliminate. Mary Magdalene couldn't be completely erased from history because her presence in the canonical Gospels was undeniable. So they transformed her. The woman who had been the chief disciple, the recipient of secret teachings, the spiritual leader who rivaled Peter, was turned into a repentant prostitute. Her powerful and independent figure became a symbol of submission and dependence. This transformation was no accident. It sent a clear message. Even the most spiritual women needed to be saved by male authority. Even the most powerful leaders had to submit to institutional control. Over the following centuries, the Church refined these manipulative techniques. They developed the doctrine of original sin, which made all people feel intrinsically flawed and in need of external salvation. They created the concept of purgatory, which generated fear about the fate of the soul after death. They established priestly celibacy, which separated religious leaders from the common human experience. Each of these doctrines had a specific purpose: to keep people in a state of permanent spiritual dependence. Mary Magdalene's original teachings about the inner Christ were replaced by the worship of an external, inaccessible Christ. Her techniques of meditation and personal transformation were substituted with empty rituals that could only be performed by authorized priests. Her message of female empowerment was crushed under centuries of institutionalized misogyny. The Spanish Inquisition, which began in 1478, was perhaps the most extreme expression of this campaign of control. For more than 300 years, tens of thousands of people were tortured and executed for the simple crime of holding alternative spiritual beliefs. But here's what should outrage you most. Many of the people who were burned at the stake as witches and heretics were simply practitioners of spiritual traditions that retained elements of the original teachings about a direct connection to the divine. Religious patriarchy didn't just eliminate texts and people, It eliminated an entirely different way of understanding spirituality, one that honored both the masculine and the feminine, that celebrated direct experience over blind doctrine, that promoted personal responsibility over institutional obedience. And do you know the deepest tragedy of all this? That millions of people for centuries have desperately sought an authentic connection with the sacred, unaware that the tools to find it were deliberately hidden from them. The manipulation was so complete, so systematic, that to this day most people believe that the only legitimate form of spirituality is that which passes through authorized institutions. They have internalized their own spiritual dependence. This isn't just ancient history. This touches your life, your faith, and your relationship with the divine in ways you may not yet fully understand. Because the teachings that were hidden 2,000 years ago are exactly what your soul has been seeking at this moment in your life. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you felt spiritually disconnected? How many times have you sought answers in institutions, in books, in external teachers, only to realize that something fundamental was still missing? How many times have you felt that your spirituality should be more direct, more personal, more authentic? That feeling is no coincidence. It's your soul remembering what it always knew. That connection with the divine needs no intermediary. That spiritual wisdom dwells within you. That you have direct access to the same source of light that Mary Magdalene experienced 2 millennia ago. Mary Magdalene's teachings about the Christ within are not abstract theological concepts. They are a practical reality that you can experience here and now. When she spoke of the light that cannot be extinguished, she was referring to that spark of pure consciousness that exists at the core of your being, beyond your thoughts, beyond your emotions, beyond all the identities you have constructed about yourself. At this moment in history, when so many people feel spiritually lost, when traditional religious institutions no longer meet the needs of the modern soul, the teachings of Mary Magdalene offer exactly what we need: a direct path to authentic spiritual experience. Have you ever wondered why so many people are exploring meditation, mindfulness, and Eastern mystical traditions? It's because they're seeking what Mary Magdalene taught: practical techniques for accessing higher states of consciousness, direct methods for experiencing the divine presence. But here's the extraordinary thing: you don't need to go to distant traditions to find this wisdom. It's been here all along, hidden in your own spiritual heritage, waiting to be rediscovered. The practices that Mary Magdalene taught about conscious breathing, spiritual visualization, and inner silence are the same techniques that thousands of people are rediscovering today as the most effective tools for personal transformation. His teaching on the integration of the divine masculine and feminine is exactly what our society needs to heal the divisions and conflicts we see in today's world. His message of the spiritual equality of all human beings is the foundation for building a more just and compassionate world. But perhaps most relevant of all is her teaching on personal spiritual responsibility. In a time when it's easy to fall into victimhood, where it's tempting to blame others for our circumstances, Mary Magdalene reminds us that each of us has the power and the responsibility to awaken spiritually. When she said, "Know what is before your face, and what is hidden from you will be revealed to you," she was giving practical instruction for modern life. Pay attention to your present experience, develop awareness of the moment, and the deepest mysteries of existence will naturally open up to you. His teachings on freeing ourselves from the authorities that attempt to control the soul have urgent relevance in our time. Not just religious authorities, but all the external voices that tell us who we should be, how we should think, what we should believe. Mary Magdalene reminds us that ultimate truth doesn't come from outside, but from the inner wisdom we each carry. She teaches us that true spiritual freedom begins when we stop seeking external validation and begin to trust our own direct experience of the sacred. In a world filled with noise, distraction, and confusion, his techniques of inner silence and deep contemplation are exactly what we need to find clarity and peace. In a society that constantly pushes us to seek happiness in external things, his message of inner fulfillment is revolutionary. And you know the most beautiful thing about all this? You don't need to completely change your life to begin applying these teachings. You can start right where you are, with what you have right now. The next time you feel that spiritual restlessness, that feeling that there must be something more, remember that Mary Magdalene already gave you the answer. The kingdom is within you and also outside you. The search is not outward, it's inward, toward that part of you that has always been connected to the divine. This truth, hidden for 2,000 years, isn't just historical information. It's a personal invitation, a call to awaken, an opportunity to reclaim your spiritual heritage and experience the direct connection to the sacredness that was always your birthright. Before continuing with what comes next, I need to pause and connect with you on a more personal level. Because what we're sharing here isn't just information, it's part of a global awakening that's happening at this very moment in history. From what country or city are you watching this video? I want to know how far this search for the truth is going. Write your location in the comments because I need to understand the magnitude of what's happening. Every day I receive messages from people from all corners of the planet, from Buenos Aires to Madrid, from Bogota to Guatemala City, from Lima to Caracas. Awakened souls who feel that something profound is shifting in the collective consciousness of humanity. Have you felt that sensation lately? That perception that we are living in a unique historical moment where truths that have been hidden for millennia are beginning to emerge en masse. It is no coincidence that at this moment in history, when humanity is facing unprecedented crises, when traditional institutions are losing credibility, when millions of people are desperately searching for a deeper meaning for their lives, these teachings on individual spiritual empowerment are coming to light. It's as if the universe itself has decided it's time for us to reclaim our personal spiritual power, as if the forces that kept these truths secret for centuries no longer have the strength to keep them hidden. Think about it. Just 50 years ago, these Gnostic texts were almost impossible to access. They were locked away in universities, available only to specialized scholars, and written in languages very few people could read. Today, anyone with an internet connection can study the complete translations of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Is this a coincidence? Or is it part of a larger plan, a universal synchronicity that is preparing humanity for the next level of spiritual evolution? When you write your location in the comments, I also want you to reflect on this. Have you noticed more people around you questioning official narratives? Have you observed a growing thirst for authentic spirituality, for a true connection with the sacred? Because you are not alone in this quest. Millions of us have felt that inner call, that irresistible impulse to seek deeper truths, to question what we've been taught, to explore spiritual paths that go beyond traditional institutions. The teachings of Mary Magdalene are resonating now because we are ready to receive them. Because we have evolved enough as a species to understand that true spiritual power resides not in external authorities, but in our own direct connection with the divine. Every person watching this video, no matter where in the world they're watching it, is participating in something much bigger than a simple search for historical information. You're participating in a revolution of consciousness, a collective awakening that is transforming the way humanity understands spirituality. Mary Magdalene was not silenced forever. Her voice is returning now, through every person who has the courage to question, to search, to reclaim their spiritual autonomy. Her message is spreading through every soul who chooses to trust their own experience of the sacred, rather than relying on intermediaries. From Spain to Argentina, from Colombia to Venezuela, from Peru to Ecuador, there is an invisible network of seekers who are rediscovering these ancient truths and applying them to their modern lives. Do you feel that connection, that feeling of being part of something bigger? Because what you feel is real. It's the collective awakening spoken of in ancient prophecies. It's the arrival of a new era of consciousness where hidden truths can finally be freely shared. Your presence here, your interest in these revelations, your willingness to question official narratives, all of this is part of a historic moment our great-grandparents could only dream of. So when you write your location in the comments, do so with the awareness that you're marking your participation in one of the most important spiritual awakenings in modern history. You're saying, I too am ready for the truth. Now we come to the most important moment of all we've shared together. Because all this information, all these historical revelations, all these secrets that have been hidden for millennia are worthless if you don't turn them into a personal, transformative experience. The truth is within you, not in temples, not in institutions, not in sacred books written by others, but in your spirit, which today begins to remember what it always knew. Mary Magdalene didn't teach theories, she taught experiences. She didn't speak of abstract concepts about the divine, but of concrete methods for awakening consciousness and directly experiencing that sacred presence that dwells at the core of your being. When she said, "He who drinks from my mouth will become like me," she wasn't speaking metaphorically. She was describing a real process of spiritual transmission that can occur here and now at this moment as you listen to these words. Because what's really calling you isn't intellectual curiosity about ancient history. It's your soul recognizing truths it's been waiting to remember all this life, and perhaps for many previous lives. Do you feel that tingling in your chest? That feeling that something inside you is being activated? Don't ignore it. That's your spiritual consciousness awakening, responding to the frequencies of truth being transmitted through these revelations. Awakening isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process of remembering who you truly are beyond all the identities you've constructed, beyond all the roles you play, beyond all the limitations you've accepted about yourself. Mary Magdalene taught that every human being carries within themselves what she called the pearl of great value. This pearl is your original divine essence, that part of you that has never been touched by suffering, fear, or the confusion of the material world. But here's the crucial point. This pearl isn't found through external searches. You won't discover it by reading more books, attending more lectures, or following more teachers. It reveals itself only when you have the courage to turn your gaze inward and confront everything you've used to avoid this encounter with yourself. The techniques Mary Magdalene taught were specifically designed for this purpose: to silence the mental noise that keeps you disconnected from your true nature, calm the turbulent emotions that cloud your perception, and create the inner space necessary for your innate wisdom to emerge. When she talked about overcoming the powers that be, she meant freeing yourself from all the inner voices that tell you you're not enough, that you need something external to be whole, that your happiness depends on circumstances beyond your control. This is your moment of decision. You can continue searching for the truth in external places, hoping someone else will give you the answers only you can find. Or you can take the bravest step of your entire life, trusting your own ability to directly experience the sacred. The spiritual awakening that Mary Magdalene experienced was not her exclusive privilege. It was a demonstration of what is possible for any human being willing to undertake the journey back to their original divine nature. Your life up to this moment has been a preparation for this recognition. Every painful experience that has driven you to search for something deeper, every moment of emptiness that has made you question the meaning of existence, every intuition that there must be a reality greater than what your physical senses perceive. Everything has been preparing you for this moment where you can choose to wake up or continue sleeping, where you can choose to reclaim your spiritual power or continue surrendering it to external authorities. The teachings of Mary Magdalene are not ancient history. They are a present invitation, a call that is ringing right now in the depths of your being, asking you if you are ready to remember who you really are. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions. You don't need further preparation. You don't need anyone's permission. The only requirement is your sincere willingness to turn inward and begin the most important journey of self-discovery of your life. The truth that Mary Magdalene knew, the wisdom that was hidden for 2,000 years, the direct connection to the divine that institutions have tried to monopolize, all of this is available to you right now. The question isn't whether you are worthy of receiving it. The question is whether you have the courage to accept the responsibility that comes with this knowledge, the responsibility to live from your most authentic truth, to trust your inner wisdom, to be an example of what is possible when a human being fully awakens. If you've made it this far, it's because you're awakening. It's no coincidence that you've resisted all the distractions of the modern world to remain present during these moments of revelation. Your soul recognizes these truths because they are part of your deepest spiritual heritage. But this is just the beginning. What you've just discovered about Mary Magdalene is just the tip of the iceberg of a much larger conspiracy that has kept humanity's deepest spiritual truths hidden. Subscribe now activate all notifications, because the awakening has only just begun and there's so much more to discover on this journey toward truth. There are even more shocking secrets kept in the shadows for millennia, revelations so explosive that even the bravest researchers dare not mention them publicly, truths that have remained buried for centuries, waiting for the exact moment to emerge. If you knew the true magnitude of what has been hidden from you, if you understood how much spiritual power has been systematically stolen from you, your indignation would become an unstoppable force for transformation. Something is appearing on the screen right now that will catch your attention. Something that isn't for everyone, only for those who have the courage to face the reality that they have been systematically deceived by the institutions they have trusted their entire lives. You came this far, you endured, you listened to every word with an open heart and an alert mind. That means you're part of that minority of brave souls who are here to reclaim the truths that were stolen from us. The forces that hid the teachings of Mary Magdalene for 2,000 years are still at work today. They continue to try to keep humanity disconnected from its true spiritual heritage. But their time is running out, because every person who awakens is a direct threat to their monopoly on the sacred. Awakening isn't just individual, it's collective, and it's happening right now, at this very moment in history. The truth always finds a way to emerge, and today, you were part of that emergence. This journey toward truth is just beginning. Ancient truths are returning, and you are part of this historic moment where what was hidden, finally, comes to light. Subscribe now, click the bell, and click on the video that appears on your screen, because what you're about to discover there will challenge everything you thought you knew about spirituality and power. Thank you for making it this far. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning of your own awakening.